Dear students, people make social change happen in groups. Group actions are either not organized mass behavior or very organized like social movements. Mass behavior is to when people engage in social interactions in response to unstructured, ambiguous, or unstable situations. In the last session, we learned about the crowds, different types, and composition of crowds. We also had a look at the information flow within the crowd and the different crowd behaviors under different situations. In the present lesson, we will understand the reasons for a crowd becoming violent and aggressive. We will also get an insight into the various theories of crowd behavior. Mob violence. One of the conspicuous features of a mob is that it tends to become violent at the smallest provocation. This is the reason why the authorities post the policemen whenever there is a huge gathering of citizens. Why does a group of citizens who have assembled without any intention of behaving in a violent way become violent and attack other groups and public property? Freud showed that sex and aggressions are the two basic drives. Human society has tried to regulate sex through the institution marriage, but there appears to be only one method of controlling aggression and violence, namely through suppression by violence. When a child behaves violently, the parents uses greater violence to suppress it. So, violence is used to suppress violence by the parent as well as by the police and by the court of justice. Freud 1930 wrote, "The fateful question for human species seems to me to be whether and to what extent the cultural development will succeed in mastering the disturbance of their communal life by the human instinct of the aggression and self-destruction. Since there is no specially approved outlet for violence as there is for sex, each individual has to suppress his violent tendencies till he builds them up to an intensity when he is no longer able to control them. Then the violent tendencies suddenly erupt the isolated acts of explosive violence. Every time there is an individual or a group violence, the society reacts with greater violence to suppress it. Violence is a shortcut to gaining some objective. The infant and the child react with violence when they are being socialized. As Battlefield 1969 writes, "Thus desires begets violence, and violence may destroy the object desired." In this sense, as many others, violence is both natural and ineffective. It rarely reaches its goal, or else, in getting at it, destroys it. True discharge itself is a goal. But if discharge of violence itself is the goal, destruction becomes the end result. Violence is the behavior of someone who cannot visualize any other solution to a problem that confronts him. It shows up very clearly in gang behavior. The purpose of violence for the gang member is to achieve success and prestige in the eyes of his peers. These are indeed the major values of respectable society as well. The gang members is convinced that there is no other alternative to secure these goals of success and prestige except through violent behavior. Violence is often unexpected in its onset and unpredictable in its course. This is why the parent and the society as a whole are frightened of violence and use greater violence to suppress it. Violence and aggression. Generally, the term aggression is used to indicate two different patterns of behavior, and this inevitably leads to confusion. As Louis Murphy, 1962, has pointed out, if we use the term aggression to describe both the capacity to move into the environment is an active, discovering, creating, and stimulating way which produces welcome result for other people, small or large, and activity aimed to destroy, depreciate, demote, or which in other ways bring discomfort for others, small or large, we create enormous difficulties for our thinking. Aggression can mean almost anything from hostility to the vigor with which either constructive or destructive acts are carried out. In the present context, aggressiveness connotes violence leading to infliction of pain or destruction and not the active, vigorous behavior that is constructive. It may be recalled that constructive aggressiveness is at the basis of the need for achievement. Violence is the behavior motivated by the wish to injure, remove, or destroy a threatening object. In this sense, it is a mode of emergency behavior called into play when there is a blocking to any drive or when there is a perception of any threat. It can be utilized by an individual or by a group. It is at the basis of murder and suicide, gang warfare, rioting, genocide, and the war with the atomic weapons. Violence and social structure. Eruption of violence is unequally distributed in society. The rates of homicide vary in terms of class, region, age, education, and sex. The lower the position in status hierarchy, the higher the homicide rate. The lower social position goes with the higher frustrations. Thus, relative deprivation, the frustration experienced on an account of discrepancy between one's lot and that of the other person or group serves as a standard of reference. The groups or individuals suffering deprivation develop the awareness that they are deprived of their rights and privileges. When upward social mobility is theoretically and legally possible but is blocked in fact, the persons lower in status become highly frustrated when they compare themselves with the prosperity and affluence of those higher in status. This gives rise to violent behavior unless it is checked by internal or external restraints. This realization of deprivation among the socially handicapped groups in the Indian society is one of the important reasons for the increase in violence in the recent decades. It is possible that such acts of violence may increase in the coming decades with a further increase in the sense of deprivation unless the opportunities of the cultural development are greatly increased in the meantime. Effects of differential socialization. Cross-culture evidence supports the view of the excessive parental severity is likely to hinder the formation of a strong superego, whereas permissive child rearing practices, which emphasize the loss of love rather than punishment as a means of discipline, are associated with a high degree of internalization, a heightened sense of guilt that is a strong superego. Socialization processes are class patterned. The bulk of the evidence seems to indicate that working class and lower class child rearing practices are more punitive than the middle class patterns. Bronfenbrenner, after giving an excellent analytical summary of the many studies of the relation between social class and socialization, concludes the most consistent finding is the more frequent use of physical punishment by working class parents. The middle class, in contrast, resort to reasoning, isolation, and love oriented discipline techniques. Studies show that physical punishment for aggression tends to increase rather than decrease aggressive behavior. This shows that though the middle class parents appear to be more lenient in their discipline techniques, they are using methods that are actually more effective in decreasing aggressive behavior in children. Kohn, 1959, finds that middle class parents are more likely to ascribe predominant importance to the child's acting in terms of internal standards of conduct, working class parents to the child's compliance with parental authority. In other words, middle class parents are mainly concerned with the developing internalized control in the child and with enforcing attitudinal conformity. Working class parents, in contrast, are mainly concerned with behavioral conformity, that is, with external compliance. The working class parent appear to instill respectable conduct in their children, while the middle class parents appear to concern with the inculcating ethical standard in their children. Where conformity is enforced externally, the individual looks upon frustration as being caused by others. In contrast, where standards for conformity are internalized, the individual perceives himself as being responsible for his own frustrations. Thus, aggressive acting out only based on the relative deprivation of the various status categories in the social structure, but is also based on the factor that the lower status categories tend to have lower built-in barriers against the acting out of aggression. Cousin, 1969. Theories of the crowd behavior. According to Leibon, 1895, collective outbursts are feature of the mass society which is characteristic of modern age with huge cities in which crowd mentality prevails. The origins of Soviet Revolution 1917 and Fascist Revolution in Germany and Italy in the 30s are traced to the conditions in mass society. Next, Leibon deals with the actual street crowd, how it is formed and how the members of the crowd are transformed by it. According to him, men undergo a radical transformation in a crowd. Primitive, irrational elements emerge. Man loses his self-control and becomes a savage. Thus, belonging to a crowd makes a person lose his conscious personality. People, irrespective of their intelligence, character, and occupational field, think and act in the way in which the rest of the people in the group do. He postulated the concept of collective mind to explain this transformation of man in a crowd. He postulated that human personality consists of two parts, a superficial conscious layer and a deeper unconscious layer which is similar in all human beings. In the crowd, the conscious personality evaporates and all persons descend to the unconscious level. As a result, the members of a crowd are intellectually inferior and are easily swayed by images and slogans of the leader. They become capable of violent actions since the normal restraints are cast off. They become highly emotional. He described three principal mechanisms to explain the emergence of crowd behavior, namely anonymity, contagion, and suggestibility. Freud, 1922, tried to uncover the unconscious wellsprings of crowd behavior. He said that the unity of the crowd is due to the libidinal ties. The leader plays the crucial role. There is an affection between the leader and the followers. As a result of this, there is an identification and each member renounces his own superego and follows the leader. All the members of the crowd behave as if they are under the hypnotic influence of the leader, losing their respective individualities. Because the leaders is the common ideal for all the members, each member of the group also identifies himself with the other members. So the unity in the group arises out these two sets of identifications. Violence becomes possible because each person is no longer checked by his own superego. Dollard explained mob violence on the basis of frustration. They linked the lynching of Negroes in the southern United States with frustration arising from decrease in the value of cotton, the mainstay of the economy. Because the white people directly knew and resented the Negroes, they became the target for aggressiveness. It is a case of displacement. Similarly, the Germans who were frustrated by the Treaty of Versailles directed their aggressiveness against the Jews. Turner formulated the emergent norm theory. While the theories of the Leibon, Freud, and the others are based on the structure of personality and the manner in which the individuals is changed by the crowd, Turner employs the concepts derived from the study of small groups. Studies have clearly shown how, when a group of people interact freely among themselves, they develop some common norms. The emergent norm theory holds that the homogeneity of the crowd arises out of the interaction of the members and the emergence of norms. The members behave according to these new norms and inhibit contrary behavior. Thus, a member of the crowd behaves in the given way because of he is mechanically infected by group emotion. Thus, this theory dispenses with the contagion hypothesis of crowd behavior. Smeltzer asserts that collective behavior occurs when people desire some change in society which is not attainable through normal institutions of society. Thus, collective behavior occurs outside social institutions and is purposefully oriented towards change. He describes a sequence of 6 determinants. 1. Structural conduciveness, structural strain, growth and spread of belief, mobilization for action, precipitating factors, and social control. Thus, Smeltzer's theory is sociological in perspective. The main problem of collective behavior which have to be explained are A. The homogeneity of crowds, and B. The emergence of violent behavior. According to Lepon, both these are due to common unconscious factors. Freud assumes that both these aspects of the collective behavior arise from the temporary suspension of ego in the members. According to Dollard, both the homogeneity and violence arise from frustrations. Turner explains in terms of the emergence of new norms. Smeltzer accounts for the emergence of collective behavior when the normal institutional methods fail to achieve the desire of the people to bring about a change in some aspects of the society. It is clear that with the addition of knowledge regarding the actual behavior of crowds and the conditions of their formation, it may be possible to formulate a satisfactory theory. With the knowledge now available, it may be stated that the homogeneity of crowd arises from some intense and widespread dissatisfaction with the established government or with the established and prevailing social structure. The wave of student strikes, labor strikes, etc. In the latter half of 1972-73 in India, in the different parts of the country may be due to steep rise in cost of living, giving rise to a general social unrest. When the general unrest is there, any precipitating cause will bring the people out into the streets. Among the contributory causes in the current political situation may be the frustration of the opposition political parties, which are fragmented and are without power within the legislatures. When the general unrest is there and the participating cause occurs, the opposition political parties enter the field and fan up the emotions of the people. The second problem of the collective behavior is the emergence of violence. Here, the frustration aggression hypothesis provides the answer. The important crowds, when they are confronted by the organized limb of the police authority, break off into violence by pelting stones and burning buses in order to demonstrate to the armed police their own power. Realizing this possibility, Gandhiji insisted on truth and non-violence among the people so that the crowd gather on the basis of widespread dissatisfaction but do not break off into violence. Conclusion. Mob violence, including looting, typically ignites with little planning. Many who join are young people attracted to excitement and the lure of defying authority. Typically, a small percentage of hardened criminals' characters are found in mobs. They do have an important role in instigating the unbridled lawlessness and setting the vicious tone of its chaos. Alcohol is an important lubricant to fire, setting, and other destructiveness for the sake of destroying. People do not loot alone. Mob violence and mayhem in groups diminish a sense in actors that they are accountable for robbery. Each looks around and sees the person next to him throwing a brick or bottles, stealing and with no resistance from authority. And the atmosphere and mentality spread among those who are stimulation and thrill seeking like flames. Looting and violence typically perpetuate and even are copied elsewhere. When the media and public authority explain away the behavior as anger and disenchantment by disaffected youth, such messages carry with them an entitlement that legitimizes lawlessness. That mob violence and looting equate with protest and are motivated by a quest for social change. Pro social individuals willing to risk their safety by assembly and protest are evolved enough to know that they gain nothing for their causes by robbing from small business that serve their communities. So they don't do it even when they are angriest. The figure standing in front of a tank at Tiananmen Square risked his own self with the military. He and his compatriots did not loot local businesses and attack others indiscriminately. Poverty is likewise not the cause of looting. Poverty is widespread in China and Russia. Mob violence and looting are nowhere to be found. Poverty is widespread in Africa and Asia, but mob violence and looting correlate only with gangs who amass arms and have the resources to rob those poorer than those gangs. Poverty did not cause anarchy during Hurricane Katrina. A natural disaster overwhelming a city's resources did, along with criminal elements taking advantage of such disaster inspired chaos. Likewise, it is a myth that hopelessness instigates mob violence. Hopelessness engenders passivity and the opposite of violence. When looting and mob violence events are reported as people versus government, such message only feeds a public sense of identification with looters and their own willingness to participate. At the same time, this message engenders insecurity and a sense that government is losing control among the law-abiding and further traumatizes a community. When it comes to mob control, the answer must begin within the self, the family, the community, in addition to the police. The media and public institutions can inspire such vital self restraint by how they establish societal red lines, including that which makes preying upon one's neighbor unacceptable. Racist speech has been eliminated through public shaming. The level of scorn and repudiation directed towards ignorant epithets ruins careers and isolated people at all socio-economic strata. It's time to learn from this example to contain another such scourge, mob violence and looting, before it continues to be emulated by opportunists elsewhere.